You can help support the channel by heading to our merchandise store and picking up some of our great aircraft designs created by our graphic designer. We have everything from fighters to transport aircraft, which you can choose to have printed on t-shirts, mugs, stickers and much more. Head to the description below and click the links and pick up your design today. Thank you and enjoy. So Chris, did you ever fly on any live operations?
Yeah, so quite a few actually. But bear in mind, my time in the Tornado Force was pretty much 2002 to end of 2012 maybe. So I covered Iraq initially, not Resonant South. Then we went back for Phase 4 operations in Iraq after the war, after Gulf War II. Then we went off to Afghanistan later on when I came back to the jet in around 2009, I think that was, back to Afghanistan. We'd just taken over from the Harrier Force at that point. And then my last operational tours were in over Libya, actually, in 2011.
So can you share maybe some stories or anything that's memorable for you from flying in Iraq? Let's start there.
Sure, yeah. So Iraq was my first ever op as a junior pilot on 14 Squadron. So I think I must have been on the squadron for about 8 months at this point. And we're off on operations over Iraq. It was Op Resonant South, which was all the stuff to do with 33rd parallel, making sure that Saddam didn't move any kit around, all that sort of bits and bobs. We had Northern Watch at that point as well. I think the JAG boys were doing that, and we were doing the southern bit. And this is immediately prior to Gulf War II in 2003. Yeah, so it must be 2002 when we did this. And it was quite worrying for me, because a lot of the guys on the squadron have done it day in, day out for many years. For me, this is all brand new, right? So I've just got combat ready, and now we're off on ops. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't really want to get shot down here, obviously, because Iraq had a really, really potent surface-to-air missile set of missiles. So, it's certainly concentrated the mind. But getting out there was great. The squadron prepared us extremely well. Certainly, I felt very prepared when I got there. And you drop into this new environment we were based out of Kuwait, Ali Al Salam in Kuwait. It's hot. You've got 8 jets out there. They're in sun shelters. You're wearing combat survival waistcoat for the first time. You've got your desert flying suit on for the first time. There's loads of things to learn. How to get in and out of the airfield, if nothing else. Working with coalition partners now. So you've got the Americans, American tankers, American mission leaders, mission commanders with their F-16s, F-15s. This whole thing was just carnage. Actually, as it transpired later, when we went to Red Flag in 2004, Red Flag would have been a really, really good introduction to Resonant South because it was pretty much the same. Obviously, I was doing it the other way around. It was busy. And I must have done, I think it was 8 weeks there, on my first stint. And I must have been about a month in when I went to drop my first bomb, my first bomb in anger, which was a coming of age for me as what would have been then a 25-year-old, I think. So, but unfortunately, as these things tend to happen, they don't always go to plan. So we were fragged to go and do a 4-ship as part of the mission that day. We'll go down to the jets, get in the jets. You usually get in the jets quite a long time before you need to be ready because, of course, it's hot. It takes a lot longer to do things. And, of course, sod's law that day, my jet breaks, doesn't it? So I'm now running for the spare in 40-degree heat with the navigator. We're legging it down to the other jet, dripping in sweat. Do a quick walk around. The other jets are now airborne. So the rest of the 4-ship, the other 3 of them were airborne. They've gone to the hold. So they're holding inside Kuwait with the rest of the mission package, all the F-16s, all that sort of stuff with the tankers, etc. So the whole package is there, right? And I'm now late, and I'm the junior pilot, right? So I'm legging it around, start the jet up, and I arrive. And I remember someone else from the formation saying to me, "You better get up here, mate. We're about to go. We're about to push across the border." And I'm like, I'm coming. And I arrive in the hold upside down. So I've got airborne, left the blowers in. I've got to get there, can't be late. And I'm going up the clappers, and I arrive in the hold upside down. I'm like, I'm here, right, let's go. And it was about a minute to the push. We push across the border. So, right, okay, we're good. Calm down, right, okay. Yeah. So off we go. And the target wasn't very far inside Iraq, actually. So I think it was only about 15 minutes all in all. So we're rolling around to this target. And we turned right onto the target run. Everything's cool because, the jet's in good order. and we're running into this target. And the next thing you know, I get a missile guidance alarm in my headset. So I've got this alarm going off, blaring in my headset. And I look in and I look at my RHWR, so my radar homing warning receiver, and I've got a spike in my left 11 o'clock. The navigator in the back is now shouting, screaming at me to brake right. So brake right, brake right, brake right. I'm like, so just go into automatic. So slam the throttles into combat, haul the jet around as best I can. Bear in mind you're at 20,000 feet in a Tornado, so it's not overly good at turning performance. Should have dumped the tanks at that point, but I didn't. So I would have got around the corner a bit quicker. So we rack it around the corner, look back to the left-hand side to see if there's any missiles coming. Okay, so of course you maneuver, put it on the beam, look for the missile to see whether there's anything else we can do about it. The navigator's putting all the chaff that he can out from one of the pods, and then it's like, oh, there's no missile. Double check. No, still no missile. Right, okay, so get your heart out of your mouth, put it back into your torso, calm down. I think we then just did kind of a 270-degree turn back onto the target run. Check the switches were all good, so mass is good, lay time's good. Okay, right, happy? Reset the targeting computer. Fine, drop the bomb, and then headed back to Q8. It was again another interesting debrief with the rest of the 4-ship, and I've still got the video. I've got the video somewhere. I can't know where it is. I've got the video, and when I've listened to it in recent times, the audio still gets my heart going. The screaming that we each other, and the alarms going off, thinking, this is for real, right? So that was kind of an interesting experience as a 25-year-old. Yeah, there we go. That's my Iraq dit for you.
Yeah. So I just want to ask one question before we move on to Afghanistan. Yeah. How did you keep calm, like after you got that warning, like right back on track, go on with the mission? Did the training just kick in, or did you just put it back into the back of your mind? Like, how does that work? Because I'd just be thinking, like, we almost got shot here.
Yeah, so I think ultimately it is back to the training. We know what you're there to do. We need to achieve the mission, right? So ultimately, that is a distraction. You can call it that. It's a pretty serious distraction from what we're out there to do. But ultimately, it's okay. Well, fine. We're still in good shape. We've still got enough fuel. We haven't lost 10,000 feet, or we need to do anything different, or the airspace is closed, or whatever. So ultimately, just go and do the job that you're there to do, and that I think plays out for a lot, particularly in today's Air Force as well. Certainly the fighter pilots are out there. They are there to do the job, and they'll do that. That training will kick in, for whatever section of the mission they happen to be flying at that point.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Just rely on your training. Go back to what you know.
Absolutely. So let's move on to Afghanistan. Do you have any stories to share from your time there, Chris?
Afghanistan. So I was lucky enough, or unlucky enough, whichever way to look at it, to do quite a bit of time in Afghanistan. So I went there first with 31 Squadron in 2009. We were the second Tornado Squadron to go out there. The Harriers have been doing it for a number of years, and 12 Squadron from Lossiemouth took over from them. Then we were out there, I think it was Christmas 2009. I then got promoted when we got back from there and went to 13 Squadron and was back out in Afghanistan around about 3 months later. So lucky me. So a reasonable amount of time flying over Afghanistan. The thing that sticks out for me, though, with the 31 Squadron thing was incredible, I think. And I still reflect on this to this day. It was a coming together of an exceptional team at just the right time. We had great leadership, great pilots and navigators, wizzos, and we had fantastic engineers, and we just made it work. And even in austere conditions, and this is what the Air Force is really good at, and the Army even better, I'm sure, and the Navy. When the chips are down and you're in, a dust bowl in the middle of nowhere, you just make it work. And that was fantastic. So I look back on that with a fondness, actually, bizarrely. And one of the things about making it work was we were doing something called ground close air support, which many of your viewers may or may not have heard of. So GCAS. So we would sit on the ground with 2 jets ready to go and intervene in any nefarious doings that the enemy were up to, for example. So predominantly we would get called to something called a TIC, so a troops in contact situation. So we'd have 2 jets, 2 crews, and a bunch of engineers ready to rock. The aircraft would be what we call cocked. So we would go out the aeroplane, we'd do the walk round ahead of time. We would put the straps and the seats in the right place so you could just jump in and strap in really quickly. We'd do every check we could, right up to anything we could that didn't involve turn the power on and start the engine, for example. And then we'd retire to our GCAS room and hang out and wait for the call. So I've been in Afghanistan for about 3 days at this point. I've done a recce mission, so I've flown once, and now I was on GCAS. And the guys have said, there's nothing going on GCAS. It's pretty quiet at the moment. Nothing happening. So I'm sat there thinking, okay, this is a good opportunity for me to spam up on other stuff that I need to know, because I've only flown once. How do I get in and out of the airfield? How do all the kill boxes work? Who's talking to who? What does it look like? Reread the rules, all that sort of stuff. A bit of downtime potentially to do that. But no, of course, after about 15 minutes of running on the GCAS, guess what happens? The hooter goes off. Next thing you know, I'm legging it to the jet. So we're running a 100-meter sprint wearing G-pants, a combat survival waistcoat, a life jacket. In fact, no, I think the life jacket was at the jet. Legging it down there, jump into all the kit, get into the jet, start the jet. Airborne about 12 minutes later, I think was our record. So I did it a few times, but about 12, 15 minutes later, right? So we're not hanging around here. And bear in mind, it's a Tornado, right? So it's not the easiest thing it's not just going to turn your car key and go.
Yeah.
12 to 15 minutes later, we're airborne, right? I'm thinking, okay, fine, I'm number 2, which is good. So follow the leader. What do I need to do? I need to get a tanker. We're going to a tick. We're going to a tick in the green zone, just to the, think about it now, east of Bastion, I think it was. Need to get a tanker, because what we don't want to be doing is certainly overhead, supporting the troops, at which point we start running out of gas, at which point we've then got to leave them at a moment of critique. That would be bad, right? So I'm now on my second radio trying to get a tanker. Leader's checking in with the JTAC, so the Joint Terminal Air Controller, who's the person that's called the tick. They're on the ground, the Army unit on the ground, and the JTAC is now talking them through what's going on. So we're going like the clappers. We're doing about 0.87, which is as fast as we can do with the wings back, 20,000 feet. I'm on the blower to get a tanker. Tanker's now moving closer to us to help us out. So that's that sorted. I switch over to the JTAC channel, and all I can hear is gunfire and guys shouting on the radio and the explosions of RPGs that are smashing into them. And you think, wow, I've been here 3 days. This is welcome to the war, right? This is serious. This is serious stuff. We're not messing around here. And we rock up into the overhead, get into our what we call CAS wheel, so go around in circles, basically about 30-degree angle bank turn, left-hand turn predominantly, because that's the side that the lightning pod is on the aeroplane, which means that the navigators, the WISOs, can get their pods onto the target or to the target area, and the pilots can also look out the window and try and pinpoint what's going on. And that is quite a lot of the challenge when you end up in these situations, which is working out who's who, what's going on, and what you want me to do. So the JTAC generally gives what's called a 9-line, which, again, you can look that up on the internet if you're interested in what it is, but it's a set of instructions from the ground forces to the aircraft, right? So it'll be like, this is my call sign, I'm here, this is my position, the enemy are here, they're doing this, I want you to do that, whatever it is. So we're taking a 9-9, so we're scribbling all this stuff down, positions, etc. Navigator's doing his best, putting it all into the kit, and then we can slave the pod on the ground. So the pod, I've got a telly, which is about, not very big, between my knees, so I can look at the telly and go, okay, I can see the pod picture, look out the window. I'm trying to match the two up now, see what's going on. And you can see the gunfire, the muzzle flashes on both the TV and out the window. The TV can do infrared and also EO. So on the infrared picture, you can see that a bit better. So you're trying to work out what's going on. Eventually, we go, okay, right, friendly forces are there, bad guys are there. Fine, now we know what's going on. So now we have a couple of options open to us. And we used to do something called an escalation of force, right? So what you don't do is turn up and then just start dropping bombs, because that might not achieve the aim. So we escalate from something called a show of force, which is flying over the top of the enemy at 100 feet at 550 knots, because now they are not just fighting or attacking the ground troops in front of them. They now have an air threat to deal with, an unknown air threat. They've just seen one airplane. It could be, multiple airplanes. So they have a choice at that point. They can either continue to fight or they can disperse. And we used to use that quite effectively. If that doesn't work, we have the option of using the gun on the aeroplane to either strafe near them, we've flown over you now, you're still not dispersed, we're going to get a little bit more serious.
Yeah.
I'm going to fire some bullets near you. If that doesn't work, okay, fine, I'm now going to fire the gun at you. If that doesn't work, we then have, we can move on to things such as brimstone or laser guided bombs. Of course, we'd always start with the lowest escalation possible, just to see what the effect is. So the leader then rolls in. So we're going around in circles at 20,000 feet. The leader rolls in for a show of force, and they're rocketing down the hill, wings back, level out around about 150 feet, I think it was, and they would go across the top of these. I saw this later on the video. Go across the top of the enemy, and the enemy, you see them scattering. Okay, so we've now achieved the aim, which is great. Leader comes back up to 20,000 feet, and then we then escort the ground forces back to Bastion, say escort. So we're at 20,000 feet. We're looking ahead on the road using our pods. I'm gone to the tanker now, so I'll get some fuel and I'll come back and we'll do what's called a rip, which is relief in place. So I'll rip the leader will go to the tanker. So we always have a pod covering the ground force on the way back. So yeah, so that was that. So that was quite, in a little bit different to Iraq, heart pounding, jump into the airplane, off we go. People are getting shot at, and we're there to, stop that happening, basically. And whilst we didn't drop anything that day, it was a successful mission because we managed to get them to disengage and got the troops back to, or help the troops get back to Bastion.
I guess that's what you wanted, really, without dropping bombs.
Of course, and it's successful. But it's really interesting, both the Iraq one and the and that particular mission. Obviously, I remember. But coming back into base afterwards, you kind of go through this kind of calming, like, and like you said earlier, the training kicks in. It's like, well, I need to format my leader now. I need to do the downwind checks. I need to get back to the airfield. You just kind of go back, all the stuff that's just happened, which is actually pretty stressful. Probably not as stressful as it is if you're a ground troop getting shot at, obviously. It's pretty stressful. You just park it. Then you get back. Then you do the debrief. And then you might sit around in the coffee shop afterwards, wondering, contemplating your life choices. But there you go. That's interesting. Yeah, interesting. You have the rise of the adrenaline, if you like, and then that low after, even though you find a jet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's crazy. And before we move on to the last bit on Libya, and when you used to do the show of forces, would you be in reheat then, or was there absolutely no need for that?
I guess it depends. I mean, the ones I did, there was never any need for it because going down the hill in a tornado, it's generally pretty good at going down, not so good at going up. So also, because there's potential for infrared surface-to-air missile threat, you would need to not use reheat if at all possible. And then you'd fly across them. You might even put flares out just to decoy things, just in case, so preemptive flares. And then you go back up the hill. And when you get above or suitable distance away, then you might use the reheat going back up just to get back up to 20,000 feet.
So to wrap up, let's talk about your time in Libya. I'm sure you have a story there for us to wrap up this interview.
Libya. So yeah, Libya was an interesting one because like Iraq, we were based in Kuwait initially, then in Aidid, so we were quite close to Iraq. I mean, Kuwait's right next door. Afghanistan, of course, we were in country, so notwithstanding the fact that we were doing our job there, we were also getting rocketed and stuff on a daily basis, actually in Kandahar. But Libya, we did it from the UK, and I'll talk more about that in a second, and also from southern Italy. So it was a very disconnected way of doing business, and the guys from late 90s will remember this from when they did Op Engadine. They were doing it out of Bruggen, so they were flying down, doing the job, and then coming back home every night, which is a bit of a strange one, really. So I was on 9 Squadron at this point for this particular mission, and I was back at home. So a lot of the Tornado Force had deployed, so there was a hodgepodge of different squadrons down in Italy at this point. Various squadrons still out in Afghanistan as well. So I was running the home team back at Marham, and we needed to launch a 4-ship to head off to do a night storm shadow mission. So we've been doing a few of these over the course of the start of the campaign before. So we did a bunch of storm shadow missions in the UK. Then we deployed out to Gioia in Italy, and then the guys were mainly doing Paveway 4 and Brimstone type sorties from there. But occasionally these missions would come out that we needed storm shadow for the various targets that we were going against. So, target comes in, we're back in the UK, off we go then. So plan the mission, and then we're off to do a storm shadow mission. Now, bear in mind the UK is 2,000 miles from right?
Yeah.
So we're going to do a really long mission. So the way we did it was we would prepare 8 aeroplanes. So 8 aeroplanes with 2 Storm Shadow missiles on each. We get 6 of them airborne, and then we get 4 of them to the first tanker bracket, right? So in fact, all 6 would go to the first tanker bracket, and then the first 4 to plug. 1, 2, 3, 4 would get the gas, and then they move on to the second tanker bracket and so on, right? And the other 2 would then turn. So I was number 3, I think, on this particular mission, and it's a night mission, so we're off. Plug to the tanker. I think we had 4 tanker brackets, so 4 night tanking brackets to get that. To do that. The whole mission was 7.5 hours long, right? So 7.5 hours strapped to an ejection seat in a Tornado, which is nice. Anyway, so it's a really interesting point though, because I mean, I really enjoyed night tanking, because night tanking is hard, right? It's it's dark. You're right next to an airline. If you don't get the gas, guess what? You've got to divert. So you can either fortunately, I didn't spokes the basket, so that's where you push the probe through the actual spokes part of the basket and not into the connection. That has happened before, and then potentially you can ingest stuff down your engine, then you've got to divert. So there's no spokesing. There was no missing of the basket as well, because of course if you don't get the fuel at the tanker bracket, you've got to divert somewhere with 2 live Storm Shadows on, which would have been somewhat difficult, more awkward anyway. So fortunately the tanking went fine, which is good. So all 4 of us end up in the right place at the right time. And I think we dropped the weapons off around about 200 miles inside of Libyan airspace. So it must have been about a 6.5 hours to get there, something like that, maybe 6 hours. Drop the missiles off, and then turn back and land in Joya with the rest of the boys. Our jets get turned, and then we fly back to the UK the next day. But again, because it's a night mission, I mean, that sounds pretty straightforward, right? So it's a night mission, 4 tanker brackets, don't spokes it, make sure you get your gas, be on time. I think we were 15 seconds late when we dropped the missiles off from the plan, which we were, obviously gutted about. 2,000 miles and it was 15 seconds late. But I mean, the level of concentration required, because not only are you having to do night tanking, you're having to formate on your mate or keep an eye, be aware of where the other aircraft are. When you get into the airspace, you've got to fly the tactical formation, albeit we're at 20,000 feet. And then you've got to get to the right missile drop-off point, at the right time. So considering it's 2,000 miles, it's no mean feat, I'd suggest. It's the first time I've fired Storm Shadow. So a lot of the guys have done it before. Some people have done it in training, training rounds, whatever. And they always said, you'll know when the missile comes off. I'm like, are you sure? Because, it's dark, I can't see it. And what's going to happen? Oh, when it comes off. Each of them are 1,300 kilos, so 1.3 tons. So you hold down the commit button on the stick, at which point this massive thump occurs, and a couple of seconds later another one occurs, and then so the missiles have gone. But you can't see the target, because these missiles, they have their own fuel, they have their own navigation in them, and they'll trundle off and do their thing, in potentially hundreds of miles away. So we just need to get to the missile drop-off point at the right time, at the right height, so the missile knows where it is, drop them off and turn around. So relatively benign in terms of the targeting, so no real targeting challenge for us, because a lot of that's done in the plan. But in terms of like the 2,000 miles at night thing, was a good achievement, I would say. One thing also mentioned about that was, again, we were talking, it's aircrew, we're talking piloting stuff here and now, but we would never have been able to do any of this without the engineers. And I know people say that time and time again, but having been a squadron boss as well, the engineers are fundamental to the success, and they should, and they do, bask in the success of the aircrew. It is literally a whole force effort. And in that particular case, Libya was a whole Tornado force effort. So it wasn't a Marmor or Lossiemouth thing. We had, like I said earlier, we had hodgepodges of different people in different squadrons doing different things in different places at different times. But everyone pulled together, and it was really successful. But there you go. That's my Libya mission for you.
Absolutely incredible. But one last question. So after all these tours on live ops and stuff, do you still keep in contact with the people you flew with, even the ground crew as well, and people who plan the mission, all this kind of stuff? Do you still keep in contact with them guys and gals?
Yeah, 100%. So I was quite fortunate in the fact that the Tornado Force is like a family, and I was so privileged to be part of that. I really, really do believe that. Also, because I went to Valley as well, I then started to see lots of guys from different forces come back, so the F3, Jag, Harrier, etc. So not only am I fortunate enough to be able to keep in contact, and I do keep in contact with many of the people I've been on operations with, but also the people that I train student pilots with as well. So, and it's all of the similar sort of mentality, right? So, yeah, that's fantastic. Like I say, it's like a family, and particularly those times in Afghanistan, those times in Iraq. The people that I serve with there, the team that I was fortunate enough to be part of, yeah, will stay with me forever. So yeah, fantastic people doing great things.
But yeah, Chris, you also were a QFI, QTI, and OC weapons instructor on the Hawk T1. Can you tell us about this?
I certainly was. So I finished my Tornado time on my first tour in 2005 and then went back to Valley. So I struggled myself through Valley, as I mentioned before, as a student, and now here I am back on the instructor course. And this is going to be interesting. And actually, I found that really hard because the
Oh,
Hawk
really?
T1 is like a Cessna with a jet engine, right? So you've got no kit, you've got a paper map, which is a paper map, and a stopwatch, and that's it. So try not to get yourself lost in bad weather in Wales. So that's flying the aeroplane. Now I've got to teach it, which is pretty challenging. So I was posted to 19 Squadron as a tactics instructor, so QFI tactics instructor, QFI whatever, and my bread and butter, because I've just been 3 years on the front line flying around at low level, so my bread and butter should be simulated attack profile, so all the low level stuff with the students, all the planning side of that, and the hitting targets. And so I learned to be a QFI on that first, and also to basically fight to maneuver, so 1v1 combat. So that was my core, if you like. And then later on, I then learned to be air defence, an air defence instructor. So that's 2v1 combat. And then subsequently, I then ended up doing the qualified weapons instructor course, which then allowed me to teach down the range. So I would teach the students to fire the gun, drop weapons off the jet, and then ultimately ended up teaching the staff to be QYs. So it was an interesting journey. Again, the Hawk is a challenge, but in a different way to the Tornado. It's a very simple aircraft, and it's very easy to for example, get lost or not be on parameters, particularly in the range. Students, and certainly myself when I was learning, trying to get those parameters so you get a good weapons solution is pretty challenging in a Hawk. But no, it was great fun. And as much as the jet was very different to the front line, I mean, I had a fantastic time on the front line. I absolutely loved operating the Tornado. But actually going back to Valley and being able to be an instructor was, again, fantastic. It's a different skill set, but again, equally good fun and equally challenging.
And did you choose to go into this role, or did someone suggest it and you're like, yeah, I'm up for it, or did you go for it like personally yourself?
So I was actually nominated for the Tornado QI course, so the weapons instructor course at Lossiemouth. But I'd had such a good time on the front line, and I really wanted to go and fly a different airplane as well. I was trying to get exchange tours. I was trying to get out to the States at the end of my first tour to go and fly F-15, F-16. Timing wasn't really working out overly well for me there, but I wanted to go back and fly a different airplane. So the option for me really was go back to Valley as a QFI. So, well, it's either that or 100 Squadron, really. I know if you remember, 100 Squadron used to do aggressive training in the UK, again, flying the Hawk. But of course, as soon as you volunteer to leave the force, RAF Manning are like, aha, a volunteer. Off you go then. So they kind of grabbed it with both hands, and next thing you know, I'm on a QFI course at Valley. Fortunately, yeah, it worked out really well, and I've really enjoyed it, as I mentioned before. But also, it was really good for me for my breadth, I think, because I was now back working with people that had flown the F3 or the Harrier or the Jaguar. And had I stayed on the Tornado force, as much as I loved it, I would have just been Tornado, Tornado, Tornado. So it was great to get back and meet a lot of the guys that I'd actually been through training with as well had come back as well. So that was great fun to be back in that environment.
And how rewarding was it, like seeing students go to, progressing and to get what they wanted? That must have been really rewarding for yourself.
Massively, massively. So I've done a reasonable amount of time at Valley. In fact, my last job, my penultimate job in the Air Force, I was OC 208 Squadron, and that was without doubt the best job I ever did in the Air Force.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't to do with the flying; it was to do with the students. then the students and the staff on 208 Squadron were absolutely phenomenal. And I'd completely forgotten how hard that course was. When you're flying around in a jet, as I mentioned before, with a paper map and a stopwatch, and we're expecting them to hit targets within plus or minus 5 seconds. We're expecting them to be accurate. Hit those numbers like 420 knots, those 4G turns. And it's all basic piloting skills. There's no kit to help you here, other than your hands and your brain. That's it. It's a real challenge. I mean, for example, the end of course check, which I always used to fly on with the students, so I could make sure that tick, you're good enough to go to the OCU now. The end of course check was just next level. So you're expecting a student who's got not a huge amount of hours on this aeroplane now to lead the plan. So I'm going to give you a problem. Here's a target. Here's some surface-to-air missile systems, and you've got an air threat. So I now need you to plan a suitable mission to go and execute that target. Okay, fine. So they're going to do all that. Then we're going to walk out to the airplane. So there's got to be 3 aircraft now. So you've got 2. He's leading, or they are leading 2 jets. So he's solo in his own jet with an instructor in the other jet, and then there's probably me that's going to bounce it. So I'm going to be the air threat. So I poke off and let them get airborne. They get airborne, and he's got to hit his target within plus or minus 5 seconds now. So and lead the formation. So I'm now going to become a real annoyance to him, and I'm going to rock up and basically try and shoot him down. So that'll get him off track and get him off his timeline. They then have to recover their track and timeline again to hit the target within plus or minus 5 seconds. So once they've done that and not get shot down again by me, they then push themselves up to top of Block 1, so about 19,000 feet, and they're now going to defend RAF Valley. So they've done their low-level bit. They're now going to do their air defence bit. So they're going to go on cap. And again, I'm now going to try and shoot them down. So I'm going to come towards them, and they then need to then enter 2v1 air combat. So they've done, like I said before, they've done the low-level bit, the simulated attack profile and the evasion, so that we've seen them do that. And as part of this composite sortie, he's now going to do air defence as well. So different skill set, different set of rules. So he's taken his evasion head off, he's put his AD cassette in, and he's basically going to try and make sure that I don't shoot them down, and they're going to shoot me down. So we're going to do 3 or 4 of those. Then, once we've done that, you've got jets all over the place at this point, of course, and we're running him out of fuel. He's now going to go, right, okay, terminate, headed whatever, formation X, go, drop back down through the cloud, recover back to Valley, right, land, and every single student got out of the cockpit with a massive grin on their face, dripping with sweat. The mental gymnastics required to make that happen are incredible. And I remember coming back as the boss, and I had to do my own workup, my own rework up back at the Hawk. And one of the first sorties I sat in on was one of these trips. And I hadn't flown for a while at that point, because I'd been on a Tornado and I'd done a ground tour. So it must have been a couple of years, must have been about 5 or 6, 7 years since I'd flown the Hawk. And I was just blown away by how good these guys were. They're really, really good.
Brilliant stuff. So overall, did you enjoy your time at Valley?
Absolutely. And like I say, being OC208 was definitely the highlight of that. And it was all about, and it always is, it's all about the people. I had some fantastic QFIs working with me, some fantastic ops staff. The engineers were phenomenal. The work rate of the staff and engineers and the support team was excellent. Added to which, the effort that the students put in, the tenacity that they showed when they were under pressure to deliver stuff that they'd never done before. I mean, the AD phase, the Hawk 2 AD phase, we used to lose loads of people at that, but they were working really hard. So, yeah, absolutely fantastic time.
Brilliant stuff. Well, to wrap up this interview, we got a couple of personal questions, if you're happy with that, Chris.
Sure, go for it.
So, what are you currently up to?
So, I left the RAF back in 2017. I've done various bits and bobs since then, but I now run my own company. So I'm running Astral Aviation Consulting. You can find us at www.astralaviationconsulting.com. What we do is we provide military and civil subject matter expertise to general, corporate, and commercial aviation, and across a range of different services such as general aviation safety, audits, compliance, human factors. We're particularly involved in supporting startups, getting them going, aviation startups, and also transitioning those startups, so certain different startups, from a kind of startup way of doing business into BAU. And yeah, make them into more established aviation companies. I've got a team of about 10 people at the moment, and I really enjoy it.
Brilliant stuff. And we'll link all them links in the description below. But on a more personal side, do you have any hobbies, Chris?
Well, I've got the obvious hobby, of course, which is flying. So as I mentioned before, I got my private pilot's license when I was 17. I actually regained it about 6 months ago, 7 months ago now. And I'm predominantly so I could take my children flying. So I've got an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old, 2 boys. And that has been absolutely so rewarding. The 9-year-old absolutely loves it. And the 11-year-old as well. The 11-year-old is a little bit more reserved. But it transpires that now the 11-year-old really wants to potentially make flying a career. So that's quite inspirational. So I started flying again, which is great. I also run quite a bit. Run 4 marathons. I was going to do 5. I thought 5 would be the right number. 5's enough. But I recently met somebody who'd done 6. So now I've got to do 10. So now I've got to do 10 marathons. So that's another 6 I've got to do. So you can hold me to that one.
Yeah.
And the other thing I try and do as much as possible, which is not quite so easy in the UK, is surfing. So I've been surfing on and off for years, badly. And this year I was like, right, I'm going to hammer the surfing. And weirdly, I find it a little bit like flying because you have to focus. And it's got technique involved. You have to focus, and you can't switch off. So I do like that because it kind of almost makes me focus on that one thing for a certain amount of time. And when you do achieve those small gains, it's really rewarding. So yeah, that's my 3 things really.
Brilliant stuff. Favorite aircraft you've flown?
You can't ask me that. That's like asking me to decide between my children, which is the favorite child.
I'm going to have to pin you down to one.
The favourite aircraft. So I love the Tornado. I mean, I've got 1,700 hours flying the Tornado. Some of the stuff that we did in it, it makes my hair stand on end. Night tanking, night level on GOGs, etc. Phenomenal. Really, really good. But in terms of the airframe, the aircraft itself, I have to say the Hawk. 1,200 hours flying the Hawk. I was fortunate enough to be involved with the Red Arrows in my last job, and it's just such a great airplane. Yeah. So simple. You put the throttle in the top left-hand corner and pull the wings off all day long. Do that 3 times a day. Doing BFM, it's just it'll look after you, and it's such a nice airplane.
Absolutely, so yeah, totally the Hawk. Agree. The Hawk, right there you go, guys. One you would like to fly, either past or present?
So I've always had a bit of a soft spot for an F-16. I was desperate to get an exchange tour on F-16 when I was, back into my first tour and subsequent tours, but it never happened. I know friends of mine that have flown it, but for some reason I just love it. I just love an F-16. So if I could fly anything, so anyone that's got an F-16 out there that wants to offer me a go in an F-16, I'll happily take you up on it.
There you go. Brilliant stuff. But yeah, Chris, can we find you online personally? I know you mentioned your company there, but are you on Instagram, Facebook, anything like that?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. The company's on Instagram as well, so look for Astral Aviation Consulting. You'll find us on Instagram. Personally, though, find me as a ex-OC208 Squadron. It's not that difficult. CK_208_. There we go.
Brilliant stuff. Everything will be linked in the description, guys. But Chris, thanks very much for coming on the show and sharing a bit of your story. It was brilliant talking to you.
Thank you.
Cheers.